I took the job because it was the only place that called back. The gas station sat off a forgotten highway that cut through miles of pine forest and low fog valleys, the kind of road that didn't show up clearly on GPS and seemed to disappear into static at night. During the day it looked ordinary, 2 pumps under a stained canopy, a single flickering open sign buzzing in the window, and a small convenience store with dusty glass and aisles that smelled faintly of motor oil and burnt coffee. But at night, when the fog rolled low between the trees and the highway went quiet for hours at a time, it felt like the edge of the world. Like if you stepped too far past the pumps, you'd fall straight into the dark. The owner, a tired man named Carl with permanent shadows under his eyes, barely interviewed me. He didn't ask about experience or references. He just stared at me for a long moment and asked if I could work alone and if I was good with following instructions. The way he said it made it sound less like a job requirement and more like a survival trait. I said yes to both. I needed the money. That was when he reached under the counter and handed me a single sheet of yellowing paper. There were 9 rules. Typed. No explanations. Rule 1, when the whistling starts, lock the front door immediately. Rule 2, do not look toward the tree line. Rule 3, turn off the exterior lights but leave the canopy lights on. Rule 4, if a customer is inside, tell them to get on the floor and cover their ears. Rule 5, do not answer the phone. Rule 6, do not respond if someone calls your name. Rule 7, if the whistling circles the building, hide in the storage room. Rule 8, if the whistling stops suddenly, count to 30 before moving. Rule 9, if you hear whistling inside the store, you have already made a mistake. I read it twice, waiting for him to laugh or explain. He didn't. He only said the last guy didn't follow the rules. Then he grabbed his keys and left me alone in the fluorescent hum of the store. My first few nights were uneventful. A trucker buying energy drinks. A lost couple arguing quietly over directions. After 11 p.m., the traffic thinned to nothing. The forest pressed close to the highway, tall pines swaying gently in the wind, their tops vanishing into blackness. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring too long at the tree line, feeling like it was staring back. Around midnight on my 4th shift, I heard it. A faint whistle. Soft. Almost playful. Like someone trying out a melody they didn't quite remember. It drifted from somewhere beyond the pumps, thin and distant. I froze behind the counter. It came again, longer this time. Clearer. The note stretched and bent in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Rule 1. My body moved before my mind did. I hurried to the front door and turned the lock, the click sounding far too loud in the empty store. My hands were already shaking. The whistle drifted closer. Slow. Measured. Patient. Rule 2. Don't look toward the tree line. Every instinct screamed at me to peek through the window. To confirm it was just some kid in the woods or a bored traveler messing around. But the memory of Carl's expression stopped me. I forced my eyes down to the countertop, focusing on a scratch in the laminate instead of the dark beyond the glass. The whistle shifted pitch. It sounded like it was right beside the ice machine now, just beyond the wall. Close enough that I could almost feel it vibrating through the bricks. Rule 3. I reached for the breaker panel and flipped off the exterior floodlights. One by one, they died. The world outside the store collapsed into darkness, leaving only the harsh white glow under the canopy above the pumps. The concrete island shone like a stage surrounded by black curtains. The whistle stopped. Not faded. Not trailed off. Stopped. Silence pressed against the window so hard it felt physical. The hum of the refrigerators suddenly seemed deafening. Then the whistling started again. From behind the building. Lower. Slower. Moving. I heard it slide along the back wall, like someone pacing with careful, unhurried steps. The note rose and fell as it traveled, circling. My throat went dry. Rule 7. If the whistling circles the building, hide in the storage room. I stayed frozen for 1 second too long, listening as it reached the side of the store, then the front again. The canopy lights flickered slightly, casting sharp shadows across the empty pumps. The whistle passed the door. Circling. It wasn't wandering. It was tracing the building. Learning it. My name drifted faintly through the glass. Not shouted. Not whispered. Called. Rule 6. Do not respond if someone calls your name. The voice sounded almost exactly like mine. Same tone. Same slight rasp at the end of a sentence. It came from somewhere near the ice machine, then shifted toward the highway, then back again, as if whoever, or whatever, was out there couldn't quite decide where to stand. Hey, it called softly. Open up. I pressed my palms flat against the counter to stop them from shaking. I didn't answer. I didn't move. The whistling continued its slow circle around the building. And it was getting closer. The sound slid along the walls like a blade tracing metal. It wasn't random. It wasn't wind squeezing through cracks or pipes settling in the cold. It was controlled. Curious. Testing the edges of the building the way a tongue tests a loose tooth. It moved slowly, deliberately, circling the gas station like it had all the time in the world. I remembered Rule 7. If the whistling makes a full circle around the building, you have less than a minute to hide. It hadn't circled completely yet. Instead, it lingered near the back door. A slow, breathy note rising and falling, almost thoughtful. Like it was deciding something. My skin prickled. Then the phone rang. The sudden shrill sound made me jump so hard I hit my knee against the counter. My eyes locked onto the receiver. Rule 5. Do not answer the phone between midnight and 3 a.m. I let it ring. The whistle outside shifted slightly, dragging across the siding near the storage room wall. The ringing continued. Loud. Insistent. I clenched my fists and kept counting the rings in my head. On the 8th ring, the whistling stopped. On the 9th, the phone stopped too. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. A second later, something tapped lightly on the side window. 3 taps. Precise. Not frantic. Not desperate. Then a voice whispered through the glass. Hey. My heart slammed against my ribs so violently I thought I might black out. Rule 6. Do not respond if someone calls your name. I stayed perfectly still. Daniel, the voice said softly. Cold spread through my chest. I hadn't told Carl my nickname. I'd written Daniel on the application. Everyone called me Danny back home, but I hadn't said that to anyone here. Danny, the voice corrected, almost amused. The whistle resumed, this time right beside the front door. Longer. Sharper. Closer. Headlights suddenly swept across the pumps outside. A truck pulled into the lot. For a split second, relief flooded me so fast my knees nearly gave out. Until I remembered Rule 4. If someone arrives during the whistling, do not let them leave. The driver stepped out, a middle-aged man in a flannel jacket, boots crunching over gravel. He walked toward the entrance casually, like this was any other late-night stop. I rushed to the door to lock it, but he was already pulling it open. The bell above the frame chimed. He took one look at my face and paused. You look like you've seen a ghost. The whistle outside sharpened into a shriek that scraped across the glass. Get on the floor, I told him. He blinked. What? Now? I snapped, louder than I meant to. The whistle pressed against the windows like it was trying to force its way through. The man hesitated, confusion written all over his face, but something in my tone must have convinced him. He dropped behind a shelf near the snack aisle. I killed the interior music and crouched behind the counter, barely daring to breathe. The whistle began circling the building again. Slowly. Methodically. It dragged along the front windows, slid past the ice freezer outside, scraped across the metal siding. Every few seconds it rose higher, then dipped low, as if mapping the walls inch by inch. It moved toward the back. Rule 7. Before it could complete the circle, I grabbed the man's sleeve and pulled him toward the storage room. He stumbled after me, whispering frantic questions I ignored. We squeezed inside and shut the door softly behind us. Boxes of motor oil and cleaning supplies towered around us. The air smelled like rubber and chemicals. I crouched between two stacks and motioned for him to stay down. The whistle circled again. Then again. Each time, it sounded closer. Not outside the walls anymore. Closer. Like the distance between it and us was shrinking with every rotation. Then it stopped. Dead silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. Rule 8. When the whistling stops, count to 30. Do not move. Do not speak. I counted under my breath. 1, 2, 3. The man beside me shifted slightly. I shot him a warning look. At 15, I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. At 22, he leaned closer and whispered, "What is that?" I didn't answer. 27. 28. 29. 30. I exhaled slowly, carefully. That's when we heard it. A whistle. Clear. Sharp. Right outside the storage room door. No. Not outside. Inside the store. Somewhere between the aisles. It wasn't circling anymore. It wasn't searching. It was moving. And this time, it wasn't testing the walls. It was testing the space between us. It was faint at first, so faint I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Just air slipping through a crack in the vent, or the building settling the way old buildings do after midnight. But the longer I stood there, the more it shaped itself into something unmistakable. Whistling. Not from outside. From inside the store. The sound was thin and steady, like someone blowing softly across the mouth of a bottle. It drifted through the aisles, weaving between shelves, too deliberate to be random. My stomach dropped as the memory of the rules flashed in my head. Rule 9. If you hear whistling inside the store, you have already made a mistake. I didn't know what mistake I'd made. I had followed everything. Locked the back door. Checked the pumps. Turned off the exterior lights at the right time. I hadn't responded to anything I wasn't supposed to. I hadn't opened the door for anyone after 1 a.m. The man standing beside me in the storage room shifted uncomfortably. He had shown up about 20 minutes earlier, pounding on the glass, begging to be let in because his truck broke down. Against my better judgment, I had let him into the storage room but not the main store, telling myself it was safer that way. Now I wasn't so sure. He forced a nervous laugh. It's probably someone messing with us. The whistle slid across the ceiling. Slow. Gliding. Like something crawling above the tiles. His expression changed. "That's in the vents," he muttered, stepping toward the storage room door. I grabbed his arm before he could touch the handle. "Don't." My voice came out sharper than I expected. He looked at me like I was crazy. Another sound followed the whistling. A soft thump. Right above us. Fine dust sifted down from the ceiling panels, catching in the beam of the emergency light. The whistle lowered in pitch, stretching into something almost melodic. It wasn't random noise. It was controlled. Intentional. The man yanked his arm free. "Screw this." He threw the storage room door open and bolted into the darkened store. I stayed where I was. The whistle changed immediately. It dropped lower, deeper, vibrating through the ceiling tiles and into my chest. The emergency lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows down the aisles. I heard the front door unlock. I hadn't touched it. The sharp click echoed through the empty store. Then the man screamed. It wasn't a long scream. It was short, cut off mid-breath, like someone had pressed a hand over his mouth or yanked him backward into darkness. Silence swallowed the building. The whistling stopped. The emergency light steadied. I didn't move. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away to whatever was out there. I stayed in that storage room, staring at the doorway, waiting for footsteps, for breathing, for anything. Nothing came. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The clock on my phone read 3:17 a.m. when I finally forced myself to step out. The store was empty. The front door hung open, swaying slightly as if it had just been released. Cool desert air drifted inside. I stepped toward the entrance slowly, every nerve screaming at me to stop. The parking lot was empty. The man's truck was gone. No headlights disappearing in the distance. No engine sound. Just empty asphalt and the hum of the highway far away. I checked the floor. No blood. No scuff marks. No dropped wallet or keys. Nothing to prove he had ever been there. Shaking, I went to the security monitor. The screen replayed the last 30 minutes in grainy black and white. I watched myself standing behind the counter. I watched the empty aisles. The footage never showed the man entering. Never showed him running. Never showed the door unlocking. At 2:46 a.m., the screen flickered to static. It stayed blank until 3:12 a.m. Then it resumed as if nothing had happened. Like nothing ever did. The next night, my phone rang at 9:58 p.m., 2 minutes before my shift started. "Carl." I answered without greeting him. "You heard it, didn't you?" he asked. There was no surprise in his voice. No confusion. Just confirmation. "Yes." A pause. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Did you follow the rules?" he asked finally. "I think so." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Then it'll come back." The line went dead. I stood there staring at the phone, the weight of his words settling in. "It'll come back." The second night after that, I made sure every door was locked twice. I checked the ceiling tiles. I kept the storage room closed. I didn't let anyone inside after midnight. At 2:43 a.m., the emergency lights flickered without the power cutting out. At 2:44, the temperature inside the store dropped. At 2:45, I heard it again. Faint. Thin. Like air slipping through a crack. Whistling. And this time, it started directly above me. The second time, I was ready. I'd spent the entire day pretending I wasn't thinking about it. Pretending the first night had been exhaustion. Desert isolation. Wind moving through dry branches in a way that only sounded human if you let your imagination wander too far. But I didn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that thin, distant whistle threading its way through the trees beyond the gas station. Midnight came slow and heavy. The highway was empty, a black ribbon cutting through endless sand and scrub. The flickering open sign buzzed faintly behind me. Inside, the station smelled like stale coffee and dust. I kept the rule sheet in my pocket, folded so many times it felt like cloth instead of paper. At 12:03 a.m., it started. The whistle. Earlier than before. And closer. It wasn't faint and distant this time. It slipped in from the tree line like it had been waiting just out of sight, testing the air. A single, steady note rising and falling, too controlled to be random. Too deliberate to be wind. My chest tightened, but my body moved automatically. I locked the front door. Deadbolt first. Then the handle lock. I reached under the counter and flipped the switch that killed the exterior lights. The canopy over the pumps went dark. The parking lot fell into shadow. Only the dim emergency bulbs inside kept the store from becoming a cave. Rule 2. When the whistling begins, lock the doors and turn off the outside lights. I didn't look at the trees. That was Rule 3. No matter what you hear, do not look toward the sound. The whistle didn't circle the building like last time. It didn't drift behind the station or scrape along the back wall. It stayed at the front, right outside the glass. The sound shifted, stretching into something smoother. The sharp, eerie pitch softened, bending into a tune. A melody. Simple. Slow. Familiar. My stomach dropped before my mind could catch up. It was my childhood lullaby. The same one my mother used to hum when I couldn't sleep during thunderstorms. The same gentle rise and fall she'd whisper into the dark until I drifted off. I hadn't heard it in years, not since before she. The thought snapped off. The tune threaded through the cracks of the door like smoke, curling into the silent store. It wasn't distorted. It wasn't warped. It was perfect. Then the whistling stopped. And her voice replaced it. Danny. Soft. Warm. Exactly as I remembered. Danny, sweetheart. Open the door. My throat tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. Rule 6. If it calls your name, do not respond. Do not acknowledge it. Do not let it know you recognize the voice. I pressed my back against the counter, fists clenched at my sides. My name came again, closer this time, right against the glass. It's okay. I just need to come inside. The handle rattled gently, like someone testing it without urgency. The whistling resumed, but it was wrong now, layered beneath her voice, slightly off tempo, like two sounds occupying the same space. The lullaby drifted upward, climbing the walls. Then it moved. The sound shifted above me. Heavy footsteps pressed onto the roof. Slow. Measured. The metal groaned under the weight. Each step dented slightly inward with a dull thud, dust sifting down from the ceiling tiles. The canopy lights outside flickered weakly, even though I'd killed the power. A faint electrical buzz filled the air. Something slammed against the front glass. The impact exploded through the store, rattling the shelves. Chips and candy bars tumbled to the floor. Cracks spiderwebbed outward from the center of the window, thin white fractures spreading like frozen lightning. The lullaby skipped. Distorted. Then cut off mid-note. Silence swallowed everything. No wind. No footsteps. No voice. Just the hum of my own blood roaring in my ears. I started counting. 1, 2, 3. Rule 8. If the sound stops abruptly, remain still and count to 30 before moving. At 7, the emergency lights flickered. At 10, they dimmed. At 15, they died completely. Darkness swallowed the station whole. Not the soft darkness of night. This was thick. Suffocating. Absolute. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The air felt heavier, colder. Like something had stepped inside and displaced all the oxygen. I kept counting in my head, but my voice had vanished. My lips moved soundlessly. 17. 18. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Slow. Deliberate. Right behind me. Not from the door. Not from the roof. Inside. The exhale brushed against the back of my neck, warm and damp. I froze at 19. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to spin around, to swing blindly into the dark. But Rule 1 echoed louder than fear. Do not turn around. No matter what you feel. The breathing continued, inches away. Then, softly, almost curiously. A whistle. Right in my ear. I didn't turn around. The breathing was warm against my neck, slow and deliberate, as if whatever stood behind me wanted me to feel each careful exhale. Then came the whistle, soft and close, like lips hovering inches from my ear. It was almost gentle, almost curious, and that frightened me more than any scream could have. Rule 9. The words echoed through my head with sudden, nauseating clarity. I had made a mistake. I realized it slowly, the way cold seeps into your bones before you notice you're shaking. Earlier that night, before midnight, I had stepped outside to take out the trash. The air had been still, the trees unmoving silhouette against a starless sky. I'd heard a faint whistle drifting from somewhere beyond the pumps, thin and distant. I remember pausing, listening, convincing myself it was just wind cutting through branches. I hadn't locked the door when I went back inside. I told myself I'd only be a second. It had been inside since then. The breathing shifted, no longer directly behind me but circling, exploring. Footsteps moved across the tile without sound, yet I could feel the vibration of weight transferring from heel to toe. The canopy lights outside flickered back on in a stuttering glow, casting long, broken shadows through the windows. The front door creaked open by itself, slow and theatrical, as if pulled by an unseen hand. The whistle began again, but now it came from every direction. Walls. Ceiling. Floor. It layered over itself in harmonies that shouldn't have existed, a chorus of my own pitch repeated and refined. My reflection in the drink cooler caught my eye. It smiled at me. Not a delayed mimicry. Not a trick of stress. Its lips pursed deliberately. Whistling. The sound came from inside the glass, from behind my own teeth in the reflection, even though my real mouth was hanging open in horror. I stumbled back, knocking over a display of chips, the crash absurdly loud against the steady melody. The reflection didn't move with me at first. It stayed half a second longer, smiling wider, then snapped into place. I ran for the door. The night air hit me hard, cold, and metallic in my lungs. The forest beyond the parking lot was silent. Too silent. No insects. No distant engines. Just the hollow thud of my heartbeat in my ears. Behind me, the gas station lights blinked out one by one until the building became a black shape against deeper black. The whistle drifted into the trees, stretching, thinning, circling. It wasn't chasing. It was herding. I didn't stop running until the tree line swallowed the station completely and the gravel cut into my shoes. Even then, I felt watched, studied, measured. I don't work there anymore. I left before sunrise, handed Carl the keys without explaining. He didn't ask for details. He just nodded in a way that told me he already knew. Carl says no one stays long. There are always 9 rules, typed neatly and taped beside the register for every new hire. Replace the bulbs before they buzz. Never answer the phone after 1:13 a.m. Don't acknowledge customers who won't blink. Lock the door if you hear whistling before midnight. And Rule 9, if you hear breathing behind you, do not turn around, and whatever you do, don't let it inside. But he told me something else before I left, something he'd never written down. He leaned across the counter and spoke quietly, like he was afraid the shelves might overhear. They are not rules to protect you, he said. They're rules to protect what's inside. I didn't understand at first. I thought he meant the inventory, the money, the building itself. Now I know better. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind moves through the trees near my apartment, I hear it again. Soft. Patient. Practicing. The whistle slides between the branches and presses against my windows, testing the seams. It tries different tones, different rhythms. Sometimes it almost sounds wrong, distorted like a broken speaker. Other times it's perfect, so perfect it makes my chest tighten. Last night it whispered my name before the melody began. And beneath the sound, faint but growing clearer each time, I can hear breathing that isn't mine. Slow. Steady. Learning. It's getting better at my voice.